You're tuned into That's Life, where we celebrate the beauty, the chaos, and the wonder of real life. Sometimes it makes you laugh, sometimes it makes you cry, but it always makes you feel. Settle in. We're just getting started. Masculine friendship is a special bond understood only by those who have experienced its depth. For a man, such a friend is sometimes closer than blood relatives. True friendship doesn't arise by chance and isn't ruined by minor quarrels. Once it takes root, it can last a lifetime, regardless of years and distances, becoming an unbreakable support. That's exactly the kind of friend the older boy had in the 1, 2 years younger from a troubled family. His parents often drank, leaving him and his 2 little sisters unsupervised. Eventually, the children ended up in an orphanage from which the younger boy ran away after a couple of weeks. But that was enough time for his parents, forgetting about the children, to change their place of residence. There were various rumors about the reason for their hasty departure. The boy categorically refused to return to the orphanage. He was barely 14 then. He settled in the empty parental home, deciding to live independently. Peers who had known him since the sandbox helped in any way they could, bringing warm clothes and food from home. For a long time, they tried to hide that the boy had run away from the orphanage, but eventually the truth came out. The guardianship authorities returned him to institutional care. The older boy, David, managed to persuade his parents to help his childhood friend, Mark. David's father, a former military man, was able to find distant relatives willing to become the teenager's guardians. And his mother, a lawyer by profession, helped with the paperwork. From then on, the friends were more than just companions. People said of them, they go through fire and water for each other. David's parents, of course, weren't thrilled about such a friend, but they didn't voice their concerns to their son, simply observing their strengthening bond in silence. One day, David owed Mark his life. They had wandered onto the river, the ice on which had already significantly thawed, but still seemed firm. The taller and heavier David tried to avoid places where water was showing through, but it didn't save him. The large boy in a bulky coat and felt boots instantly went under the ice. Fortunately, he managed to surface and grab the edge. His clothes quickly became soaked, starting to drag him down, his legs already cramping from the icy water. Luckily, Mark didn't lose his head. They say that in moments of mortal danger, a person's hidden reserves open up. Apparently, this was just such a moment. The thin, short boy grabbed his friend by the collar of his coat and pulled up with all his might. Later, he himself couldn't explain how he managed to pull out his tall friend in waterlogged clothes. Fear multiplied his strength tenfold, and he not only pulled his friend out, but also dragged him several meters away from the ice hole, further from the dangerous edge. They collapsed onto the snow, gasping for breath from exertion and cold. When Mark looked up a few minutes later, he saw that David was crying, smearing snow and blood from a small wound sustained in the fall across his face. "What's wrong?" Mark asked, himself trembling either from the cold or the fear he had just experienced. "Did you break something?" "What? The wound?" David croaked, trying to catch his breath. It's just a scratch. Dad's felt boots? He's had them since the army. Some kind of trophy. He'll kill me. He'll kill you, but don't whine. He won't, Mark replied. Let's go to my place now. You need to dry off. Otherwise, he'll really kill both me and you. Yours don't like me much as it is, and then they'll completely forbid us from being friends. But how will I go in one felt boot? At that moment, 12-year-old David surprisingly resembled a small, helpless child. For a couple of minutes, he thought, then took off his boots and gave them to his friend. He wrapped his own foot in a scarf and put the wet felt boot on Mark. In the evening, having dried his clothes as much as possible, David returned home. Mark's Aunt Martha, who had taken him in, guessed from the dirty tracks in the hallway that the boys had gotten into trouble, but she didn't scold or investigate. She generally took little interest in the boy, believing that this way he would become independent and serious faster. David came down with severe pneumonia, but never confessed what caused it. This was one of their many shared secrets. His parents were never able to find out what had happened. About the missing felt boot, Mark said, we tried to dry it on the stove, got distracted playing, didn't notice it burning. The story was improbable, but David's parents had no choice but to believe it. Martha, who had taken guardianship, only tried to provide the boy with shoes and clothes. She had no time to care about his moral character, upbringing, or education. Even the influence of good friends couldn't keep him from a bad path. At first, he simply stopped informing her where he was going and who he was spending time with. Then he started staying overnight at friends' places, answering all her remarks with the unchanging, "You're not my mother." The boy committed his first theft at 15. David was intensely preparing for military academy exams at the time. The second theft was complicated by an assault on a security guard, and Mark, along with his so-called friends, was sent to a juvenile detention center. Despite the fact that he didn't participate in the assault, the other boys dragged him along, and he considered refusing cowardly. The friendship, which began in the sandbox and survived many trials, didn't break off, but moved to a different plane, that of memories and rare letters. David continued to be interested in his friend's life and tell him about his own. Despite the fact that some letters came from a military academy and others from a juvenile detention center, the boys still found common topics for conversation. Perhaps that's what youth is good for. During this time, we are able to close our eyes to the insignificant and see only the good in people without burdening ourselves with prejudice. David's parents were wary of their son's association with a boy of questionable reputation, but they had long given him the freedom to choose his own friends. He would later give the same freedom of choice to his own children and wouldn't regret it. A person either learns to take responsibility for their life or learns to shift it onto others, then blaming everyone around them for their fate not turning out as they wished. After the academy, David entered a military institute, then rapidly climbed the career ladder. He married Marina, and they had twins, a son, Stephen, and a daughter, Victoria. Life flowed in a calm, predictable channel. News from his old friend came less and less frequently until it stopped altogether. In his last letters, Mark had practically stopped talking about himself. only once mentioning in passing that he had been lucky enough to meet a real angel in his life. He himself didn't go into detail, and David decided not to pry, respecting his friend's personal space. Through his acquaintances, David repeatedly found out that Mark was alive but serving another sentence. There have been many such sentences in his life. It seemed he was so accustomed to prison life that freedom no longer enticed him. He didn't know how to settle into normal life, how to earn a living, or if there was any point in trying to reform at all. Behind bars, everything was familiar and routine, requiring no effort or adaptation. David's parents had passed away by then, and Martha, who had taken Mark in, also didn't live long. Only old acquaintances remained in their hometown, so David rarely visited. Several times he intended to sell his parents' apartment, but there were no buyers. Renting it out was also risky. There was no one to go and check on tenants, and the likelihood of encountering dishonest and slovenly people was too high at the time. However, unexpectedly, the class president, Lisa, decided to organize a reunion of former classmates. And for once, David had a short leave at that exact time. The family council decided to give the head of the family a couple of days off from daily worries and send him to his hometown. At the same time, he planned to visit his parents' grave and stop by his former class teachers. Marina didn't go with her husband as she had urgent matters at her shop. September 1st was approaching, which meant the demand for flowers would sharply increase. It was necessary to order the popular items needed for the holiday. At the station, transferring to the suburban electric train to his hometown, David noticed an elderly man who struggled to climb into the carriage and sat by the window. Something about his appearance seemed surprisingly familiar. David sat in such a way as to keep the man in sight, observing without attracting attention. The old man seemed significantly older than his years. David himself had just turned 40 at the time, the prime of life, as his wife said. They exercised together, enjoyed outdoor activities, and led a healthy lifestyle. Their healthy lifestyle and warm family relationships had a beneficial effect on their appearance. Even among colleagues, David looked significantly younger than many. Most military men, upon reaching certain heights, stopped taking care of themselves, gained excess weight, and looked simply ridiculous during exercises, sweating profusely in the heat. David always set an example of excellent physical fitness, easily performing forced marches by running or skiing. His wife also often attracted men's attention with her toned figure and well-groomed appearance. Her husband didn't cause jealousy scenes. On the contrary, he was proud that his wife was an ideal for many. Their children were often told that their parents looked like their older brother and sister. The man David was watching closely looked over 60. Gray hair, sunken, stubble-covered cheeks, a hunched back, and a terrible cough betrayed his age. There were moments when he almost choked trying to clear his throat. Every half hour, he went out to the vestibule, took deep drags, held his breath for a long time, and exhaled clouds of acrid smoke. David, who had disliked the smell of tobacco and alcohol since childhood, flinched every time he looked at this man. His father, who had never smoked a single cigarette or touched alcohol in his life, had instilled in him a healthy lifestyle. His father was a model of integrity and strength of spirit for David. Apparently, this man hadn't been so lucky in life if he found solace in harmful habits that were destroying his health and shortening his life. The strangest thing was that David, who had an excellent memory for faces, couldn't recall the man. He had definitely never seen him before, but there was something subtly familiar about his appearance. The man returned from the vestibule after another smoke, and unexpectedly, their eyes met. Surprisingly, the man's eyes were young, although surrounded by a deep network of wrinkles. It seemed the thought that David looked familiar also struck him, but his memory or David's appearance proved to be much better. A sincere joy flashed across his face, and in an impulse, he took a few steps forward. Then, as if remembering something, his face changed abruptly. He turned around and quickly walked back into the vestibule, and from there into the next carriage, as if trying to hide. For a few seconds, David was frozen, then almost ran to catch up with the man, barely believing his eyes. His friend, it was his friend, his childhood comrade, the daredevil, the hooligan, and brawler, the one who saved him when he fell through the ice, the one who couldn't live in an institutional orphanage and then spent most of his life in prisons, prematurely aged, hunched, thin, and sick. But it was him. David had no doubt. Despite the completely changed appearance, he recognized the look in his old friend's eyes. Direct, slightly impudent, with a spark of past mischief. David practically ran through the next two carriages, scanning the passengers as he went. At that moment, the conductor announced a stop at a station, and David saw through the window that his friend had gotten off the train and was walking quickly towards the village. It was still about half an hour's ride to his hometown, but the man couldn't miss the opportunity to talk to his friend. So, without hesitation, he jumped from the train steps and ran after the receding figure. "Friend, Mark, stop!" David saw that his friend had quickened his pace upon hearing his name called. Fortunately, the healthy, physically active David ran fast, and so after a couple of minutes, he caught up with him and stopped in front of him, blocking his path. "Man, go on. I don't know you," Mark said, trying to bypass David. The smoky, hoarse voice resembled his friend's voice from youth, but David began to doubt. Had he made a mistake? Maybe he wanted so much to believe that, upon returning to his hometown, he would meet his old comrade, that he had mistaken some stranger who reminded him of his friend from a distance. No longer so sure, he addressed the man again. "Oh, come on! I saw how happy you were to see me there, in the carriage. You couldn't not recognize me. Are you upset that I didn't write? But it's not my fault. I didn't know your address. I wrote as much as I could, and then I tried to find out where you were, how you were doing. I've been living in the same place for many years. Is that what you're upset about?" "Man, I'm not a woman to get offended. You've mistaken me for someone else." Mark started looking around, as if afraid they would be overheard, and then said more quietly, "You shouldn't be seen near me. Go away. Why do you need problems?" David barely restrained himself from rushing to hug his old friend, despite his warnings. "You old devil. But thank God. I thought I was losing my mind. How are you?" "Pretend you didn't hear the questions. Keep looking around," Mark said. "Go to the station. The next electric train is in an hour. There's no other way home from here." "Are you going to your parents?" David asked. No parents? Been 5 years now. Pity? They were good people, Mark replied. And who are you going to see? David clarified. To them, to the grave. Decided to come for the class reunion. I'll be home if you want. Come by this evening. I'll stop by, David replied briefly. With those words, Mark continued on with a quick step, as much as his limp allowed, and David walked back to the station. What had happened seemed like a dream or an incredible coincidence. It was precisely during his rare visit to his hometown that he was lucky enough to see the person with whom fate had separated him many years ago. School years flashed through his memory like a whirlwind, their friendship with this brave, desperate, and sometimes reckless boy. How many things he came up with, how many times they got into trouble because of him, how many times he brought his friend home and fed him when he was hungry as a wolf cub, and how Mark tried to take the best pieces with him for his sisters, Emily and Grace. Yes, his friend's life wasn't easy in youth, and it seemed to have battered him severely since then. He looked like a real old man. David remembered his 70-year-old father shortly before his death. His friend now looked significantly older. Waiting for the next electric train, he reached his hometown, and the first thing he did was go to the store. If his friend came in the evening, he needed to welcome him properly, like in childhood. He remembered that there was a meeting with school friends that day, but decided it could wait. His friend was more important to him. Besides, Mark's behavior had worried the man. Calling the class president Lisa, he warned her not to expect him at the reunion. Unexpected important matters had come up. Lisa was noticeably disappointed. It seemed the whole meeting had been organized specifically for him. David even remembered that she had shown him attention in school. She was a model girl who had matured early, while he was still naive about relationships with the opposite sex, with only a military career on his mind. However, when he met his future wife, Marina, he decided that this was the girl who would someday become his life partner. In the evening, there was a quiet knock on the door, and almost immediately, the door opened and Mark walked in. You still haven't learned to lock the doors, just like your parents? Mark smiled, and for a minute, he was again the way David remembered him. After all, they hadn't seen each other for nearly a quarter of a century. Yes, it's a habit of mine, David replied. Marina always scolds me. Less so now, she's used to it. Been married a long time. Tell me about yourself. I'll tell you. Come in. Mark nodded. I've put something together for us here for our unexpected meeting. Remember how you used to always try to feed me, couldn't stand that I was thin and small and you were healthy, even though you were younger than me? Mark smiled again, remembering their carefree childhood. I remember, David replied. It's strange who I took after. My parents were thin, but I grew like a weed. Only in the academy did I discipline myself, started eating less and spending more time on sports. By the institute, I was already lean and fit. My children are thin too. I guess I took after the neighbor. Remember the old man on our playground? The fat one? Your parents would have a fit if they heard you. You always blurt things out without thinking. Mark shook his head. The friends spent half the evening reminiscing and talking. David noticed that Mark immediately went for the bottle, which he, who didn't drink himself, had brought just symbolically. Under the influence of the alcohol, Mark became more unrestrained, even a bit coarse. Although it was clear He was trying to control himself. At the beginning of the evening, he either avoided questions about his life or answered evasively. After drinking, his tongue loosened, and he told David the sad story of his fate. Listen to this. You have a wife, children, a career, and I have nothing to tell. Only how I changed prisons and committed crimes. The only thing I can be proud of is that I never harmed a single living creature, didn't even touch animals. And thefts. Who among us hasn't committed them? Not everyone got caught, though. And you know about my first sentences. For being young. For foolishness. Prison was hard then, scary. I wanted freedom. To my friends, to adventures, to fun. Only that fun always led back behind bars. And life there is not sweet at all. I won't tell you everything. You don't need to know. Only once, a cellmate of mine received a letter from his sister, and it had her photo. She was 22, I was 25. You won't believe how many girls I'd had, but this one just wounded my heart. I asked permission to write, and you won't believe it, she replied. We started corresponding. I even started behaving well, was desperate to get out to her. I got out, came to her town, but her parents threw me out. They didn't know about our correspondence. I spent a month knocking on their door, pleading, persuading. I even got a job to prove I'd reformed. But they were adamant, unyielding. Anyway, I backed off a bit, decided to give them time. I started living a normal life that was probably the best year of my whole life. I got a job as a loader, had money. I spent it all on her, bought her gifts. She refused to take them though, but I had an incentive to work, to live a normal life. Her parents only relaxed their vigilance 6 months after I arrived, and we started meeting secretly. But everything secret becomes known sooner or later. She got pregnant. Her parents found out. An abortion wasn't possible. It was too late. And her health was poor. So they filed a police report against me, and I went back to the zone. And soon after, she gave birth to my daughter. So you're a father too. Congratulations, David exclaimed. I'm nothing. Mark smiled bitterly. I haven't seen my daughter even once. She's almost 15. She doesn't even know my name or who I am at all. Her parents strictly forbade her mother from telling the girl anything about me. What about her brother, Thomas? Didn't you become friends with him in prison? David asked, surprised. Friends? Yeah, right. As soon as he found out I was planning to see her after prison, he ambushed me with his buddies and beat me up. Who needs a relative like that? She's a smart girl, a beauty, just graduated from university. The fact that she replied to my letter back then was nothing short of a miracle. Anyway, my daughter grew up without me, and I never managed to fix my life. I just drifted, changing zones, each one worse than the last. Until one day, I got a letter from her. She wrote that she was seriously ill. I went crazy, honestly. I have 5 years left on my sentence, and the doctors gave her no more than a year. Do you understand? My beloved. I never loved anyone else after her. I had no one after her. Everyone seemed the same, brainless, empty. So I ran away. I ran away to see her before it was too late. That's why I got scared when I saw you. Nobody remembers me here anymore. And if they do, they probably wouldn't recognize me. Life has battered me. But it's okay. At least I'll live the last years in freedom. Even if they search for me, I won't surrender alive. I thought I'd lie low and then figure out how to live on. After that, I went straight to her. She lived not far from here. I made it. David saw how hard this story was for his friend to tell. I made it. I went to her hospital for a whole week. Her parents didn't forbid it anymore. They were old, and I wouldn't have harmed her. But they didn't let me near my daughter. They only let me see her from a distance. And they didn't tell her who I was. She passed away, yes. Burned out like a candle. And soon after, both her parents did too. Yes, her mother only survived her by a week. Her heart couldn't take it. And her father by 2. And who is your daughter with now? David asked. That's just it, my friend. My daughter is left alone, Mark replied. She's facing the orphanage. Help me, I'm asking as a friend. How can I help? I'm nobody to her, David said, taken aback. Take her in. Come up with something. Your parents, remember? They helped me out. They didn't abandon me, Mark pleaded. But they found relatives, David countered. Does your daughter have anyone besides you? And her uncle, Thomas. I can't, Mark replied. And her uncle drinks. Since he got out of prison, he hasn't been able to live normally. They won't give him the child. I can try to find relatives who can take guardianship of her, David offered. Friend, I'll be indebted to you for the rest of my life. Ask for anything. Just don't let her end up in an orphanage, Mark exclaimed. The men spent the rest of the evening talking about children and how to help the girl. Mark, weakened and exhausted, quickly became drunk and fell asleep. David stayed awake for a long time, thinking over and recalling the past day. Besides the issue with the girl, he had to figure out how to tell his wife and children everything, how they would react, if they would understand him, if they would judge him for having such a friend. In the end, the man concluded that it was best for them not to know anything for now. He could make inquiries without informing them. However, he needed to act quickly. There was little time left. In the morning, he called everyone who could help in any way. Various options were offered, even taking the girl in himself. This option seemed the most sensible to him. A 15-year-old girl is practically an adult. In a couple of years, she'll be completely independent. He and Marina would look after her, get to know her father if possible. In short, David decided to pursue this path. He didn't voice his plans to his friend yet, only promised to help, left him some money for the time being, and allowed him to live in his parents' apartment. It had been empty for many years anyway. As for himself, it was time to return home to his affairs and family. So, how was the reunion? Marina greeted him as if he hadn't been away for a couple of days, but a year. Oh, it was fine, David replied. Everyone's gotten old, put on weight, become uninteresting, not really anyone to talk to. He lied. The feeling was sickening. He didn't lie to his wife, he thought. It was better not to say anything. Why lie to the face of someone dear to him? No one at all. What about your friend you told me about, I think? We didn't go to school with him. He's older than me. Didn't you see him either? Marina asked. No, David lied again. Marina was surprised that her husband returned, thoughtful, quiet, and taciturn. He often went out to talk on the phone on the landing, constantly receiving messages. He answered all questions monosyllabically. Like any woman, she decided that he had met some old love during this trip. Old feelings have flared up, and now he was tormented, walking around like this. She didn't want to think about the fact that he had left home more than 25 years ago and had hardly been back since, focusing on the most obvious reason. in her opinion. Meanwhile, things with the guardianship of Mark's daughter, Alexandra, were going well. David managed to arrange a delay in sending her to the orphanage, but he needed to urgently come to the guardianship department and bring documents. He told Marina that he was being sent on a business trip. However, she found train tickets to the same city he had recently gone to for the reunion. The puzzle pieces fit, and Marina was finally convinced her husband had someone else and he was hiding it. The next day, she saw him in a store buying warm teenage clothes. Who could he be buying them for? Their daughter, Victoria's size was significantly larger. It turned out that he not only had an old love somewhere, but also a child. Such betrayal was unbearable for Marina. Her first impulse was to approach her husband and find out everything, but later she would repeatedly regret not doing so. Then she would have spared herself suffering, uncertainty, and the unknown. But all that would come later. For now, she said nothing to her husband, returned home, and waited for his return with explanations. However, as it turned out, patience and humility had never been her strong suits. So she decided to find out everything herself. Following her husband, she noted the train number and destination. So she bought a ticket for the same train. To be honest, she regretted giving in to the momentary impulse as soon as she was in the entrance hall, but it was too late to back down. She called the children, Stephen and Victoria, and warned them that she and their father would be away for a couple of days. The more perceptive Stephen understood from his mother's voice that something was wrong and it worried him. "Mom, is everything okay? You never go anywhere without us?" Stephen asked. "Dad has a business trip, and I decided to go with him so I wouldn't be bored," Marina replied. "I've accumulated some time off work." Stephen pretended to believe her, but his mother's explanation worried him even more. David, unaware that his poor cover story and his wife's imagination could threaten the existence of their family, anxiously considered his next steps. The best option would have been for Mark to turn himself in and then for David himself to adopt Alexandra. However, Mark had firmly stated that he would not return to prison. David didn't press the matter, deciding he would return to the conversation later. It never occurred to him then how drastically his life would change. For now, he was simply going to meet the girl, his friend's daughter, who didn't even know who her father really was. Alexandra's grandfather and grandmother, who had reluctantly allowed her father Mark to spend the last week near her mother, had strictly forbidden him from seeing his daughter. And Alexandra was brought to her mother in such a way that she didn't cross paths with her father. David used all his acquaintances and connections, of which there weren't that many. Since Alexandra was already quite grown up, he was allowed to take guardianship of her. However, she could still end up in an orphanage at any moment. All the property of her grandfather, grandmother, and mother would pass to her, but she could only finalize the necessary documents after reaching adulthood. Currently, she continued to attend school, but social services employees came to look after her. As he was informed, the girl was very independent, quiet, and modest, like her mother and her mother's parents, explained Lisa, the acquaintance who was helping David with the paperwork. "And do you know who the father is?" Lisa asked. "Yes," David replied. "My old friend. He wrote me a letter, asked for help." Why doesn't he do the paperwork himself? She asked, surprised. He's in prison. David didn't lie about the kind of person the girl's father was, but he didn't say that his friend had also escaped. Wonderful. Where did such a friend come from in your crystal clear biography? Lisa exclaimed. In childhood, we don't choose friends. We just become friends, David replied. And then such bonds are formed that cannot be broken. Besides, I owe him my life. Could I really refuse him such a request? Oh, that honesty and integrity of yours will get you into trouble someday. Lisa shook her head. What did your wife say about all this? She's not against it, David honestly admitted. She doesn't know. And honestly, I don't even know how I'm going to tell her everything. Are you serious? Lisa asked. You're taking guardianship of a grown girl who knows neither you nor her father and has recently lost all her relatives. And you haven't even talked to your wife and children. Where will you bring her? Where will she live? What will she wear? How will the school issue be resolved? Connections are good, of course, but I can't cover for you indefinitely. My good advice to you is to talk to your wife and tell her everything. Otherwise, you risk changing your life significantly, and it's not guaranteed to be for the better. The acquaintance who was helping with the paperwork was the same class president, Lisa. Communication with her was a bit taxing for David, as she subtly hinted at a closer relationship. Therefore, her concern for his family didn't seem sincere, rather the opposite. But there was common sense in her words. Secrets and hidden matters from his wife could ruin their ideal marriage, built on trust. After this conversation, David genuinely wanted to talk to Marina. But that evening, Mark called to find out how things were progressing. During the conversation, he coughed terribly. David didn't like the cough and asked his friend directly about his health. Everything's bad, Mark replied. That's why I took off. The doctor there only gave me a couple of months, and then I found out about her illness too. Everything just came together. In short, I'll be following her soon. Thank God I met you then. And now I can die in peace, knowing that you won't abandon my daughter. After these words, Mark coughed heavily again, and David understood. He needed to go to his friend immediately. Otherwise, he might not make it in time to see him alive. Mark had strictly forbidden him from contacting doctors. David arrived a couple of days later without telling Marina. Just then, Lisa informed him that the guardianship documents were ready and he could pick up the girl. Only she didn't have warm clothes. She had grown over the summer and was no longer small. The next day, David bought everything necessary and drove to his hometown. He didn't know then that Marina was on the same train with him and saw the situation completely differently. In the evening, he and Mark discussed what to do next. Have you even seen your daughter, Alexandra? Talked to her? David asked. No, Mark replied, and I shouldn't. Here's what I've come up with these past few days. Let's tell her you're her father. Right, and mine will kick me out, David objected, and nobody will believe it. I lived very far away at the time she was born. I finished my studies, got my first assignment. The children, Stephen and Victoria, were just starting kindergarten. But nobody will believe I could have been running around with someone else while married. And I don't want to bring a child into the family and start with a lie. it's better to say I'm a very distant relative. It's also a lie, but at least it won't threaten my family. We'll come up with something. No, we won't come up with anything ourselves, Mark said firmly. I'll pick her up tomorrow. Bring her here. You talk to her and tell her everything yourself. No, David refused. Why not? David sincerely didn't understand why his friend was so stubborn. After all, he loved the girl's mother. He would love Alexandra too. But circumstances hadn't allowed it. Because, Mark exclaimed, look at yourself and at me. What kind of father would you want? A handsome and fit officer or a sick, dying convict? You're silent? That's the point. And I don't want her to get a father like that. It would never occur to me to be ashamed of my parents, David said quietly. That's because you got the parents you did, Mark replied. And I was ashamed from childhood. Always drunk, dirty, abandoning me and my sisters, Emily and Grace. Even though I lived with my Aunt Martha, I still went down the wrong path. And there's nothing to say about my sisters. They couldn't make it in this life. David didn't ask what Mark meant by saying his sisters' lives hadn't worked out. He himself barely remembered them. The girls were no more than 5 when they were taken to the orphanage, and they never returned home. Mark visited them a few times, but he always came back looking as black as a thundercloud. Life in an orphanage was never sweet, and even less so for 2 little girls, leaving them no chance for a normal future. In short, both Emily and Grace were alive but living, to put it mildly, a disreputable lifestyle. Both had children in orphanages. She didn't have a father at all, David said. I was told she's a quiet and modest girl. Tell her the truth, don't hide it. It will be easier for you, a weight off your soul. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and both men jumped up from their seats as if on command. 2 hours earlier, Marina, following her husband, had gotten off the train at the station. Since she didn't know where he was going, she decided not to lose sight of him. He transferred to a suburban electric train, and she settled behind him, guessing that he was going to his hometown. She had never visited her in-laws, so she was afraid of getting lost in an unfamiliar city. It seemed her husband was so deeply engrossed in his own thoughts that he paid no attention to anything around him, as if he were in another dimension. A couple of times, he almost noticed his wife, his indifferent gaze sweeping over her. He seemed to have faded in a few days, turning from cheerful and lively into thoughtful and gloomy. Seeing her husband enter the entrance hall of one of the buildings, and then the apartment on the second floor, Marina decided to sit on a bench and think. She needed to calm down, collect her thoughts, and decide how to start the conversation and how to explain her presence in her husband's hometown. After sitting for about half an hour, she decided to go up to the apartment and talk to her husband. After all, sitting here, she wouldn't find out anything, and the unknown was the worst. If he was there with a woman, then so be it. They would divorce. She loved her husband, but she would never agree to share him with anyone. Marina never thought that walking a couple of dozen steps would be such a difficult task for her. Her legs completely refused to obey. Her hands became cold as ice, and her temples began to pound. Gathering her strength, she raised her hand and knocked. Muffled voices were heard in the apartment, which fell silent after her knock, and a tense silence hung in the air. "It's me!" David exclaimed. He and Mark had stood up as if on command, exchanging silent glances, trying to figure out who could be knocking on an apartment that had been empty for many years. "Are you expecting someone?" David asked quietly. "Are you out of your mind?" Mark whispered. "I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I covered my tracks for several months, taking trains in one direction, then another. I traveled by electric trains and buses so they wouldn't track where I was going. In the end, I didn't show my face outside that apartment. Maybe it's someone for you? That class president, Lisa, who won't leave you alone? Or one of the neighbors?" "Well, maybe. Although I didn't really talk to anyone and ask them to call before coming," David replied. "You hide and I'll open it. If it's for me, I'll jump from the balcony." "Where are you going? You can barely walk," Mark exclaimed. "Sit still, don't fidget. If it were the police, they probably wouldn't bother being polite, knocking on the door, and waiting for an answer." Mark, of course, assumed it was the police coming for him. Rushing to the balcony, he started calculating if he could run after jumping from the second floor. David, realizing what his friend was about to do, silently grabbed him and pushed him into the room that had once been his parents' bedroom. It locked from the inside, and the windows faced a quiet courtyard, providing cover. "Sit quietly and don't do anything stupid," David whispered. "Maybe a neighbor saw me." "I'm not going back to the zone," Mark said firmly. "I'd rather be shot during arrest, but I'm not going back there." "Sit quietly, maybe it'll pass," David soothed him. David quietly closed the room door and headed for the front door. The people didn't allow him to see the figures at the door, but it was clear it wasn't the police, and they weren't there for his friend. How great was his surprise when, upon opening the door, he found his wife, Marina, on the threshold, from whom he had been hiding the fact that another child would soon be in their home for several days. "Marina, what are you doing here?" David exclaimed, astonished by her appearance. "I wanted to ask you the same question," Marina replied. "Did you go on a business trip too?" "I did," David replied. Seeing his wife's eyes, he realized he could no longer and didn't want to lie to her. "Come in. I'll tell you everything now, and then you decide." Letting his wife into the apartment and closing the door behind her, he went to the small room and knocked on the parents' bedroom door. "Come out, it's for me," he called. "Yes, my childhood friend. I told you about him," David said, indicating Mark coming out of the room. It was noticeable that Marina was surprised by Mark's appearance. "So, you said he was older than you, but I didn't think he was old enough to be your father," she said, not hiding her astonishment. "Hello, Marina," Mark said quietly. "I'm only 2 years older. Life has just been very hard. That's why I look like this." "Marina, sit down," David said. "I'll tell you everything now. Let me just make you some tea. You're all chilled. Your hands are freezing." Only now did Marina notice that she was shivering and her hands hadn't warmed up. Perhaps she hadn't expected to sit in light clothing for half an hour in the cold. For the next hour, David and Mark took turns telling her about the circumstances that had brought them together in this apartment today. Marina listened, unable to believe her ears. On the one hand, she was relieved that her fears about a mistress were unfounded. On the other, she was surprised that her husband had made such an important and responsible decision without informing her. she also honestly told them about her fears and thoughts of a mistress. Now that the reason for her husband's mysterious behavior was known, Marina even felt a little embarrassed about her suspicions. So, darling, we now have an important decision to make to take another child into our family, David said, concluding. You've already made that decision, Marina replied. We need to decide how to tell the girl who we are and who her real father is. By the way, you haven't called her by name even once. I didn't know it, Mark said. I was forbidden even to mention her so as not to upset her mother. And she, because of the medication, barely spoke and hardly recognized me. I know. I was given all her details, David replied. I just wanted to introduce her to you tomorrow. Well, the girl's name is Alexandra. A whole range of emotions that swept over him at that moment was reflected in Mark's eyes. It had been a long time since David had seen men cry. Stern military men, his friends and colleagues, didn't allow themselves such weakness. His father also considered tears a disgrace for a man all his life. Mark looked at David with eyes full of tears and couldn't hold them back. His beloved, his only beloved, had given their daughter his name. This was the greatest revelation for him. Mark couldn't control the overwhelming emotions for a long time. Marina even had to rummage through her purse and find a sedative pill, under the influence of which he quickly fell asleep. And she and David had a long and serious conversation ahead of them. Marina didn't want arguments, shouting, and scandals. She understood that her husband couldn't have acted otherwise, but she was hurt by his secretiveness. He had been silent for so many days, making decisions, coming up with plans. Although he had never before kept secrets from his wife, the only exception was his work. Marina knew absolutely nothing about it and never inquired. Otherwise, they had no secrets from each other. Their relationship was completely transparent. Over the many years of marriage, they have managed to maintain a wonderful relationship. They had met when he was a cadet at the military academy. Handsome, tall, athletic, many girls were drawn to him, but he chose her. She attended the school next to his academy. Girls from her class often went to discos at nearby community centers, hoping to meet a handsome cadet. But military boys held no interest for her, and she didn't consider herself old enough for dates. David noticed her when she was walking along the embankment with her friends. He singled her out then for her modest appearance. Of all the girls, only she had long hair and a simple dress. However, approaching her proved not to be the easiest task. He even volunteered to paint the famous red stripes on the local monument. Cadets did this annually to mark their graduation. They were hesitant to entrust this responsible task to just anyone. Only the most reckless would take it on. David, however, was one of the well-behaved ones who were never allowed near such things. But he wanted to surprise the girl he liked, and so he volunteered himself, showing uncharacteristic boldness. When he entered the military institute, after graduating from the academy, the girl gathered her courage and went to study in the same city. Her parents supported her decision and never regretted allowing their daughter to enter a pedagogical college after the 9th grade, after which she went to a university located near the institute David attended. The young couple decided to get married in their second year. Everyone told them then that such early marriages often ended in separation. But they loved each other so much that they simply ignored such predictions, confident in their feelings. A year later, twins were born into the Young family: a son, Stephen, and a daughter, Victoria. That's when Marina fully realized how successful her choice of life partner had been. Her husband, despite being at work and studying all day, tried to let his wife sleep at night, getting up with the children, changing diapers. He even learned to prepare formula in a half asleep state. Contrary to popular belief, maternity leave not only didn't test their relationship, it strengthened their union. Marina studied by correspondence, planned to send the children to kindergarten and go back to work. Her husband suggested she find some work she enjoyed, something with a flexible schedule. His career involved periodic moves, changes of garrisons and military units. He managed to get a very good assignment in a large city near the capital. Marina, with her pedagogical education, initially got a job at a local school but couldn't handle the complete lack of free time, the workload, and the constant complaints from superiors and parents. That's when the courses she had taken for enjoyment came in handy. She found her calling in floristry and flower growing. At first, she cultivated a beautiful flower garden at home, and then she learned to arrange bouquets, wrap gifts, and 2 years later, she opened a small flower shop. Her husband was fortunate enough to stay at the same duty station for a long time, which allowed Marina to develop her business. His wife's business slowly but surely grew. She was able to open 2 more shops and expanded the range of goods. At first, only her husband helped and supported her, and then the children, Stephen and Victoria, started helping in any way they could. By the age of 40, Marina, to the envy of her friends, looked wonderful. She had a beloved and loving husband, David, and wonderful children. Stephen decided to follow in his father's footsteps, and Victoria studied design. Overall, her life until recently seemed ideal to her. Her friends were openly envious. Her subordinates never tired of praising and thanking her, and her children delighted her with their successes. And now their marriage was facing a serious test. Marina was relieved that her fears and doubts about his fidelity were unfounded. But the fact that he was ready to change their lives so drastically was disconcerting. She truly didn't understand how they would live on. Essentially, the young girl, Alexandra, was a complete stranger to them. And if David hadn't agreed to help his old friend, she would have remained a stranger. Now they were taking responsibility for another child with her own character, interest, and who, on top of everything else, had recently lost all her relatives. Marina also believed that the girl had the right to know her real father, and she and David decided to try again tomorrow to persuade Mark to tell his daughter everything. Fortunately, the issue of finances didn't arise. Their adult children, Stephen and Victoria, had already become partially financially independent. Their parents only gave them money for major purchases. Otherwise, both Stephen and Victoria were independent. Marina tried not to think about how they would react to the new family member, hoping for their understanding. David didn't try to justify himself or come up with other solutions to the situation. "Darling, I couldn't have done otherwise," he told Marina. "He has no one but me. It turns out the girl doesn't either. I didn't tell you because I didn't fully understand what I was getting into, how serious it was. After so many years of marriage, haven't you realized that I'm with you in any situation, good or bad? Marina replied, but now it's not just about us. It's about the girl, Alexandra, who doesn't know us at all. It's about our children, Stephen and Victoria, who will now have to accept and love a girl they don't know at all. Not to mention that she might be against moving in with us. She's an adult. She makes such a decision herself. By the way, how is she herself ready for a new family? My acquaintance Lisa, who helped me gather the guardianship documents, said that the girl is in a state of shock, but not against the move. David replied, as far as I understand, she's quite withdrawn, quiet. It's still unknown whether that's good or bad. Sometimes it's very difficult to reach an agreement with quiet people. We'll manage, I'm sure, Marina said, smiling. You have no idea how often I thank fate for a wife like you, David replied. You chose me yourself, Marina said with a smile. It's late now. We need to try to get a couple of hours of sleep. Tomorrow will be a difficult day, plus the journey home. By the way, what about Mark? He's very ill. He needs to be in a hospital. The police are looking for him. We can't even call an ambulance. Wanted posters have already appeared around the city. Repeat offender, criminal, and he's just a sick, life-battered, unhappy person who doesn't have much time left. Honestly, I don't know what to do with him. I'm not a little child to be worried about. Mark entered unexpectedly, as if he had been standing behind the door for a long time and heard everything. Nevertheless, Marina is right. You need help. You've already helped me, and you don't owe me anything more. You paid me back long ago for pulling you out of that ice hole back then, and you didn't owe me anything anyway. You would have gone in after me too if I had fallen. So we'll say goodbye tomorrow. I'll go. I'll be around. All right. Well, if not, don't remember me unkindly. David and Marina exchanged glances, understanding that arguing was pointless. Indeed, he was in a state to decide how to live on himself. But David's heart was uneasy. Are you sure you shouldn't tell her? He asked Mark. After all, you can tell her without mentioning prison, say you're very ill, which is why you can't take her yourself. No, I don't want to, Mark replied. And to lie, it's better not to say anything at all. It was clear that the man was hesitating, but David didn't press him. The decision remained his in any case. The next morning, leaving Mark in the apartment, David and Marina went to pick up Alexandra. She had been there for several days as the period for gathering guardianship documents had been slightly delayed, and the guardianship staff couldn't leave her alone in the apartment without adult supervision any longer. While they were sorting out the bureaucratic matters, a short, thin girl quietly entered the room. She looked about 10 or 12 years old. She didn't resemble an adult 15-year-old teenager at all. Her long, light brown hair was braided. David recognized his friend's features at first glance. The same eyes, build, hair color. Only his friend's gaze was cheerful, slightly impudent, while the girl's was sad and thoughtful. She quietly greeted them, asked if she could go home to pack her things. Apparently, she had already been informed that she would be living in another city. The girl barely looked up at David and Marina. The child psychologist who had worked with her said that her behavior was just the beginning. The realization of loneliness and the loss of loved ones would come later, and it was difficult to predict how she would behave. Having settled all the formalities, the couple ordered a taxi to take the girl to her apartment to pack. Their departure was planned for late evening, so Marina suggested she visit her friends to say goodbye. "I don't have friends," the girl said quietly. "No one to say goodbye to?" "No one at all. Yes, I had some in junior school, but then my grandmother enrolled me in music and art school, ballet, and with several tutors. There was no time left for friends, so they decided it wasn't interesting to be friends with me." "How wonderful you are. You dance, play, and study." Marina tried to encourage her. "Yes, I guess," the girl said in a colorless voice. It seemed that her activities didn't bring her any joy, and she felt no pride, as if it were just a heavy duty. At home, she packed photographs, a few personal items of her own, her mother's and her grandmother's and grandfather's, and clothes. Marina was surprised that the girl walked past a shelf with numerous medals, cups, and certificates several times without even looking at them, as if she considered them completely insignificant clutter that had no place in her small suitcase. "If you can't fit everything now, we can come back soon to pick up the rest," Marina said. "I know the way now. I can take you." "It's not necessary," the girl replied. "I'll try to take only the essentials." The girl paused for a moment and added, "I've never been called anything other than Alexandra." "If you like it, I'll call you that too," Marina said. "Didn't you like it when I called you Lexi?" "I don't know. It's just unusual," the girl replied. "Do you have children?" The girl showed interest in those who were to become her family for the first time. "Yes, we have adult children, a son and a daughter, twins," Marina replied. "They're 20 years old now. Stephen will be a military man like his father and grandfather. And Victoria chose a fashionable field, design. She loved to draw, just like you. She went to art school. She had a talent for it from a very young age." "I didn't have talent," the girl said quietly. "My grandfather just wanted to load me up like a workhorse. I never liked drawing or dancing. I don't like showing myself in public at all. I'd rather sit quietly in a corner and have no one bother me. I always asked my mother to have a little brother or sister. How wonderful it must be to have a brother or sister, especially from birth. You're born with a best friend right away." "But I wouldn't say they became best friends from birth," Marina laughed. "Rather, they were born with a partner for mischief and a partner for fights." "That's what I meant," the girl replied. "I always wanted a big family. But my mother was her parents' only daughter, and I'm her only daughter too." "And do you know anything about your father?" Marina asked cautiously. "Yes, a little," the girl replied. "Truthfully, my mother told me secretly from my grandfather and grandmother that he was a good person. He just got into bad circumstances. He loved her, and she believed that all her life and said that he loved me too, even though he couldn't see me." "Did she tell you anything else?" Marina clarified. "Only that his name is also Alexander," the girl replied. "And would you like to meet him?" Marina asked. "Of course," the girl replied. "Honestly, I hoped your husband was my father until I learned his name." At that moment, David entered the room. Seeing him, the girl returned to packing her things as if the conversation was over. "We'll leave you. We won't disturb you," Marina said to the girl. "Get ready." She took David by the arm and led him into the kitchen, quietly closing the door behind them. "Dave, she knows," Marina whispered. About her father and his name. You came in at the wrong time. She might have told me more. The girl is withdrawn, of course. We can't hide from her that her father is alive and nearby. What if he passes away and she never even sees him? I completely agree with you, David replied. But what about Mark? Listen, we're going to raise and educate this girl, Marina said. We need to think about what's best for her. That's why, as her guardian, I've decided to introduce her to her father. I completely agree with you, David replied, hugging Marina. An hour later, they were climbing the stairs to David's parents' apartment. A taxi, loaded with several suitcases that Marina had helped the girl pack, was waiting at the entrance. She had packed everything that could help the girl adapt to a new place. The girl didn't ask why they had stopped here. It seemed she was under the influence of sedatives or in deep shock. As the psychologist explained, her psyche had indeed shut down from the outside world to help her cope with the loss. Opening it up and drawing her out of this shell would require a long and gentle effort. Approaching the door, David opened it and asked Marina and the girl to come in a little later when he called them. Closing the door behind him, David was surprised by how quiet the apartment was, as if no one was there. Walking into the kitchen and the room, he found Mark sleeping, lying face to the wall. What are you doing lying down in the daytime? David said quietly, and gently touched his friend's shoulder. Mark didn't respond, so David decided to rouse him more forcefully and tried to turn him onto his back. However, it was difficult. His friend seemed to have curled into a tight ball. At that moment, David understood what was wrong. Taking his friend's hand, he tried to find a pulse without much hope. But by how cold the hand was, it was clear. His friend had quietly passed away in his sleep, most likely several hours ago, and had already become stiff. He couldn't let Marina and Alexandra see this, so he quickly got up and went out to them on the landing. From her husband's look, Marina understood something bad had happened. Meeting her eyes, David shook his head, explaining everything without words. Alexandra, I already told you. This is Sergei's parents' apartment, Marina said to the girl, trying to remain calm. He just stopped by to pick up some documents. Go down to the car. I'll be right there. Even a younger child would hardly have believed such a ridiculous explanation. But Marina was incapable of anything more. When the girl slammed the entrance door, she turned to her husband and asked, Am I going alone with her? Are you staying for the funeral? I guess that's what I'll have to do, David replied. I don't even know what to do about the fact that he was wanted. God forbid. They'll arrest me for harboring a fugitive. Say you came to check on the apartment and found him. I don't know what else to say. Try to say less, Marina. He left this morning. David felt a lump rising in his throat. His loved ones were leaving, and there was nothing he could do about it. Perhaps there comes a moment in everyone's life when a series of losses begins. A series you can never get used to. Hold on, Marina said. You need to compose yourself now. You can give in to your feelings later. We're going to the station. Call when you can. Going downstairs, she found the girl standing by the car. Can I ask something? The girl asked quietly. Of course, my dear, Marina replied. Anything. Promise not to lie to me, the girl asked. I promise, Marina blurted out before she could think. Why did we come here? The girl asked. Just tell me the truth. Marina realized she couldn't invent any more lies. Your real father lived in this apartment for the last few days, she said. He lived here until this morning. He passed away. Please accept my condolences. We wanted to introduce you, but we didn't make it. For a few minutes, the girl was bewildered and couldn't say anything. Finally, she composed herself and said, I want to see him. I won't be scared. I need to see him at least once to remember him. Sonny, is it worth it? Marina asked quietly. He's gone now. Are your parents alive? The girl asked. My mother is, yes. My father passed away a long time ago, Marina replied. Did you see him before he died? The girl clarified. Of course, Marina replied. I want to see him at least once too, the girl said firmly. Okay, Marina agreed. Let's go into the apartment. They entered quietly. David was already calling the ambulance and the police. He froze with the phone in his hand, stopping mid-sentence, looking at Marina questioningly. It's necessary, she told him. She took the girl's hand. Where is he? In the room, David replied. Not for long. The police will be here soon. You shouldn't be seen. I'll be quick, the girl said. Don't worry. I'll just look. However, the girl's courage was only enough to cautiously step over the threshold and see the figure on the bed. Crying out, she turned to Marina and buried her face in her shoulder. Marina hugged the weeping girl and quietly led her out of the room, then gently escorted her to the car and helped her into the seat, trying to comfort her. They drove to the station in silence. The girl stopped crying, but occasionally wiped away tears with the edge of her collar. Boarding the train didn't take long. Moreover, Marina was glad that it was already late evening outside, and the darkness hid her tear-stained face. The girl lay down in her seat and soon fell asleep. But Marina couldn't sleep. Besides the heavy thoughts about their future, she was worried about her husband. He had to not only arrange the funeral, but also try to prove his non-involvement in the presence of a fugitive criminal in his parents' apartment. In the morning, the train arrived in the city that had become home to Marina. They had lived here with David for a long time. Their children had grown up here. There was still a lot of time before the holidays, during which she had to inform her children about the new family member. The girl woke up early but didn't wake Marina, just lay there and quietly looked out the window. Finally, she said, Marina, do we still have a long way to go? No, less than half an hour, Marina replied. Marina, why did you take me in? The girl asked. Who am I to you? Your father, Mark, and my husband, David, were friends since childhood, Marina replied. He asked us to look after you, and David couldn't think of anything else but to take you under guardianship. After you turn 18, you'll be completely independent and can decide how to live. Marina wanted to convey that the girl would be able to make important decisions herself, but the girl interpreted her words in her own way. So you just have to tolerate me for 3 years, and that's it, she asked. I can go wherever I please? Go wherever you please, dear. You misunderstood, Marina corrected her. I only meant that you will become independent, self-sufficient, and we will always try to support you. You can count on us, but you can live however you want. But until then, You'll put up with me and then kick me out? The girl continued. As far as I understand, you're not at all thrilled about the idea of taking in just anyone born. I saw my father. My mother said he was only 3 years older than her. And that old man I saw yesterday, who is he? My real father or an old man who somehow ended up in your husband's apartment? What's wrong with him? Was he homeless? Was he in prison? What? Marina was struck by the change that had occurred in the girl overnight. Still quiet and withdrawn yesterday, today she had become quite sharp, rude, as if she had dropped a mask. Alexandra, I'm not sure I'm the one who should tell you all this, Marina replied, trying to speak calmly. Just a couple of days ago, I, like you, knew nothing about your father or about you. I even thought my husband had a mistress in his hometown. And then I saw him buying you clothes and decided you were his daughter. I bought a train ticket and followed him. And there I met him and your father, and they explained everything to me. Honestly, I was shocked, but I understand my husband. He couldn't have acted otherwise. And that means we all have to accept this fact and learn to live together. To conflict or to learn to cooperate, that's your decision. You're an adult. We'll provide you with a proper quality of life, but how our relationship will be depends only on you. It seemed that such a direct answer somewhat calmed the girl's burgeoning anger. Moreover, Marina had been warned that such a reaction was normal. Perhaps it would make it easier for the girl to cope with the pain of losing her loved ones. And Marina, as an adult, had to support her by showing understanding. It was amazing how quickly a complete stranger could become close. Just yesterday, Marina had absolutely no desire to take a stranger's child into the family. And today she felt so sorry for the girl that she couldn't leave her alone without support in this difficult world, feeling a sense of responsibility. Marina gently took the girl's hand and said, I know you're angry at everyone, including us, for how cruel fate has been to you. If you need to be angry, vent your emotions, but don't cultivate hatred towards us. We sincerely want to help you. As soon as you turn 18, you can claim ownership of your parents' property and move out. Until then, we all need to learn to live together peacefully. And you won't abandon me? The girl's voice trembled. It seemed she was about to cry. No, we won't abandon you, Marina said firmly. If it's up to us alone, your parents didn't abandon you either. They left against their will. That was their fate. Tell me about my father, please, the girl asked. Darling, I can't. I know almost nothing about him, Marina replied. I can only say he was very ill. That's why he looked that way. David can tell you more. They were friends since childhood. I remember him telling me how your father saved his life, pulling him out of the icy water. Really? How? Tell me, the girl exclaimed, showing genuine interest. We've arrived, Marina said. Let me tell you that story at home, and tomorrow we'll go get you enrolled in school. I never thought I'd go back there, the girl muttered. Did your children go there? Yes, Marina replied. And it's a good school with strong, experienced teachers. My children, Stephen and Victoria, even got into the universities they chose without tutors. I also had a good school, but my grandfather and grandmother still hired me a bunch of tutors, the girl said. They cared about you. They wanted you to have a wealth of knowledge from childhood and not turn out like your father, Marina explained. I once overheard their conversation. Grandfather said he would pay any money for tutors send you to any schools and clubs just so your father's genes wouldn't show themselves. And yet, he only wished you the best. It's just that sometimes adults wanting to do something good go a little overboard without considering the child's wishes. They didn't get home until noon. Marina called her shop, warned them she will be away for a couple of days, and took a day off. Her deputy was surprised but didn't ask questions. In all their time working together, Marina had only taken Sundays off a couple of times. She loved her work very much and dedicated a lot of time to it, and Marina decided to spend the day with the girl to help her adapt to the new place, feeling her responsibility. David hadn't called. It was starting to worry her. She was afraid to call herself, afraid of hearing something bad. In the evening, she decided to call the children, Stephen and Victoria, and inform them that a new member had joined the family. She called Stephen first. For some reason, she always found it easier to talk to men. Stephen's initial reaction was unexpected. "Mom, are you sure this is a good idea?" Stephen asked. "A grown girl with such psychological trauma? What could come of it? You and Dad were never harsh or strict with us. The fact that Vicky and I turned out this way is only because of your example. But we grew up with you, and this girl didn't. She was raised strictly. What will happen when she feels that you won't be so strict? 15 is the most difficult age, even when everything in life is calm, and she's lost her whole family." Stephen seemed to voice all her hidden fears. She herself understood everything her son was saying, understood, and was afraid. Therefore, she decided to be a little stricter with the girl at first, so she wouldn't take advantage of them, wouldn't abuse their kindness. Victoria supported her brother's concerns. She was the more energetic, lively one of the pair, sometimes even defending her brother. But here she completely agreed with him. The girl needed to be accustomed to freedom gradually, otherwise she could harm herself by not knowing boundaries. Marina was struck by the fact that the children didn't oppose their parents' decision, didn't ask unnecessary questions, only expressed their concerns. Apparently, they had long been accustomed to their parents making only well-considered and thought-out decisions that could be trusted. Moreover, their mother said it was their father's decision, which meant arguing was useless. His authority was unquestionable. In the evening, David called. His voice sounded very tired. After he and Mark had left, he had waited for the ambulance and the police, reporting that he had found an unknown man in the apartment. The death was natural, so the police showed little interest in the discovery. However, after lunch, the investigator called and invited him to come in. "Can you imagine? He invited me," David told Marina. "Apparently, professional ethics have reached our valiant police too. Anyway, I was informed that the deceased is my friend, Mark. He escaped from prison. He came to the apartment, apparently, because he had nowhere else to go. So, I took on the funeral arrangements." Nobody was surprised, especially since I said we were friends in childhood. "I'm leaving tomorrow afternoon. The police have no questions for me, no reason for an investigation, and no grounds to cause me problems." "Thank God," Marina exclaimed. "I was so worried. How are things with you?" "Stephen called me, shared his concerns," David replied. "I called both of them. They surprisingly easily accepted our decision, but both said to be stricter with the girl at first. I agree with them, although it's not our method. we're used to trusting. However, Marina couldn't follow the advice. In the evening, the girl asked to go out for a walk. Marina offered to accompany her, but she categorically refused, citing that she was already grown up and was only going for a short walk nearby. I won't go so far from the house that I get lost, the girl said. You have my phone number. I've memorized your address. Okay, but try to be back by 7 in the evening, Marina said. I know that's an early time, but you don't know the city. Besides, it's not the safest neighborhood. Even though you're quite grown up, you look like a little girl. When I first saw you, I thought you were no more than 12. Be careful. Or would you like me to walk with you? No, I want to be alone for a bit, the girl replied. Okay, but try to keep your phone on, Marina requested. The girl nodded and left the apartment. After 7 in the evening, Marina decided to call herself. The girl's phone was off. After half an hour of fruitless calls, Marina decided to go look for the girl. It was already starting to get dark outside. Sparse passers-by hurried home, pulling up their collars against the biting wind. After circling the building, all the nearby squares and courtyards, Marina decided to call David. He should have just boarded the train home. Darling, what's wrong? David asked, concerned. Alexandra is missing, Marina replied. She asked to walk around the neighborhood. We agreed she'd be back by 7 and her phone would be on. It's 8:30 now and her phone is off. Should I go to the police? They won't even take a report from you, David replied. I think this is her way of testing the boundaries. This is exactly what we talked about. We can't let her control us. Otherwise, we won't manage. I'll be there in the morning and we'll find her together if she doesn't come back sooner. However, even in the morning after David arrived, there was no news from the girl. It was decided to go to the police, as the girl didn't know the city and could be in trouble. David asked Marina to wait for him outside, and he went to the investigator. Listen, could you possibly give me the addresses of places where young people gather in our city? He asked. But you said the girl is quiet and modest? The investigator asked, surprised. The girl was just taken in yesterday, and before that, she grew up under total strictness, David explained. Understood, the investigator said. I'll look them up now. There are quite a few such places here, to be honest. It would be good if she didn't end up there. Our local hooligans quickly turn such sheltered girls into homeless ones. Try to keep a better eye on the child. Having received a printout of addresses, David and Marina decided to start looking for the girl themselves. After driving to several addresses, they realized how incredibly lucky they were with their own children, Stephen and Victoria. Not once had their children made them worry so much. Both had grown up active, but not reckless, of course. Like all teenagers, they got into various situations, but their parents never had to look for them in such places or go to the police. David waited for Marina to say that he had caused all this and dragged her into it, but Marina, as in many other situations, was supportive and tried to help. They had taken on this responsibility together. Blaming her husband was pointless. In one of the courtyards, on a bench, they found the girl sleeping. It took some effort to wake her up. To their surprise, she didn't smell of alcohol. As she later explained herself, she simply decided to walk around and wandered through the city for almost 24 hours until she fell asleep from exhaustion on the nearest bench. She had deliberately turned off her phone. She wanted to be alone and think about her life. Didn't you think that we would be worried? David asked. I did, the girl replied. I won't apologize. With those words, she turned away to the window and remained silent all the way home. At home, David decided to talk to her himself, understanding that the conversation would be difficult. Alexandra, Marina said you were asking about your father, he began. Well, listen, I have never seen a more honest and just person ready to go through fire and water for a friend. He himself was ready to go without food for days, but bring something tasty to his sisters, Emily and Grace. He pulled me out of icy water, although he could have died himself, as he was half my size. Life was hard for him. He got involved with a bad crowd, went to prison. Yes, your father was a criminal, but he knew how to admit his mistakes. In that, you are definitely not like him. I don't see his honesty in you, his openness, his gratitude for kindness. Nothing of what I valued and loved him for. If you want to live with us, you must live by our rules. Call so we don't worry. Keep promises. Obey. Be respectful, David continued. I understand that you're not thrilled about the idea of living with strangers. If it's that difficult for you, I'll take you back to the orphanage. Just 3 years, and you're free. Go wherever you want. You're your own master. But if you want to have a family, loved ones, support, and love, learn to adjust. We didn't force our children, Stephen and Victoria, to be obedient. They learned from our example. Stephen and Vicky are not against you living with us. Marina and I are ready to give you our attention, our care. But if you leave whenever you feel like it, don't answer calls, and then don't apologize. Don't unpack your things. We're going back. I'll give you an hour. Think about it. I'm not rushing you, not persuading you, but you either accept our conditions or you don't. With those words, he went out and closed the door behind him, not allowing the girl to say a word. The hour they gave her to think felt agonizingly long. They could hear her walking around the room, opening and closing her suitcase several times, moving a chair as if she couldn't find a place for herself. Marina and David sat silently in the kitchen, exchanging glances at every sound coming from the room. Finally, Marina said, "Are you sure this is the way? She needs to learn to make decisions. Before, adults made them for her, but at some point, you have to grow up. Some people take many years, and some grow up in a couple of weeks." Her father, Mark, seemed to me not to have been a child from childhood. He bore responsibility for his sisters, Emily and Grace. What happened to him in the years we didn't see him, I can't judge. But I remember him as mature beyond his years, forced to grow up early. By the way, I found out what happened to his parents and sisters, Nava, David said. When the children were taken away, the parents went on a prolonged drinking binge out of joy, froze the heating system in the house, and froze to death. I was about 12 then. The adults didn't tell us, and they didn't tell Mark the truth when he ran away from the orphanage. They lied that his parents had moved. And his sisters? His sisters repeated their parents' fate. After the orphanage, they found partners like themselves and became alcoholics. Mark mentioned in passing that their lives didn't work out. In short, both Emily and Grace are alive but living, to put it mildly, a disreputable lifestyle. Both have children in orphanages. How did you find that out? Marina asked, surprised. The neighbor told me. David replied. Mrs. Gable recognized me when I was explaining to the police how my friend could have ended up in my parents' apartment. A cunning old woman, by the way. She immediately understood that I was lying to them. She saw me arrive with him and carry groceries, but she didn't turn us in. So she told me everything. By the way, they all live nearby here. We'll see what Alexandra decides. Maybe we'll tell her about her relatives. No need. I heard everything. It turned out the girl had been standing behind the door for a long time and had heard the whole conversation. I don't want to live like my father's family. I'm ready to abide by all your conditions, especially since yours are even milder than my grandfather's were. Only my mother used to spoil me before. Forgive me. I don't even know what came over me. You don't owe me anything at all and could have left me in the orphanage. 5 years passed. The girl, Alexandra, graduated from school with honors and entered a pedagogical institute majoring in sociology and social work. She wanted to help children like her father, Mark, to help and protect them from the conditions they fell into, to give them a chance to become normal people. She kept the promise she made to David and Marina. There wasn't a single problem with her. She studied, tried hard, obeyed, didn't argue, gradually becoming family to them. The older children, Stephen and Victoria, also accepted the girl quite warmly. Victoria became friends with her younger sister, often helped her choose outfits, and the girls went on vacation together several times. Stephen took a long time to accept the girl, treating her with suspicion, expecting trouble, but gradually he also thawed. The fact that he got married while still studying and had a son greatly contributed to this. Stephen, you've become a softie, his sister Victoria often teased him without malice, poking fun at her brother, who could talk for hours about what his child could do. You just haven't been in my shoes, Stephen replied. When you have your own, you'll become just as much of a softie, I assure you. Oh no, Alexandra exclaimed. I don't want to be stuck with diapers and bottles from a young age. My career and travel are my priority. But if I feel like having a little child smear porridge on me, I'll gladly use my nephew. In fact, Alexandra adored the baby and spared neither money nor time for his whims. In all the years, David and Marina never once regretted taking the girl into their family. The older children, Stephen and Victoria, also accepted the girl quite warmly. Victoria became friends with her younger sister, often helped her choose outfits, and the girls went on vacation together several times. Stephen took a long time to accept the girl, treating her with suspicion, expecting trouble, but gradually he also thawed. The fact that he got married while still studying and had a son greatly contributed to this. After Stephen and Victoria finished school and moved out, the house seemed empty and quiet. Even though both David and Marina had jobs they loved, the need to care for someone to look after them was felt very keenly. The happy grandfather and grandmother often took their grandson, giving the young parents a little break. They remembered how hard it had been for them without parental help with twins during their student years. By the time Alexandra graduated from school and moved out, Stephen's family had a grandson, whom the happy grandfather and grandmother often took in, giving the young parents a little break. They remembered how hard it had been for them without parental help with twins during their student years. Alexandra couldn't find the strength to meet her father's relatives for several years. Neither of his sisters, Emily or Grace, showed any interest in her, but their children were very happy that besides their parents, they also had normal relatives. Alexandra tried to visit them often, give small gifts, and tell them about herself and her life. She often remembered her first day in their family. Then she was faced with a choice: a peaceful life in a family with trust, mutual respect, consideration of interest, love, and understanding, or the orphanage. During the time she waited for the decision about her fate, she understood that she should strive to leave there, not return. She chose the family and never regretted it. Despite growing up in a family with a different way of life, she was able to adopt the family values that David and Marina instilled in their children. When she met a wonderful young man several years later and decided to marry him, the first thing she did was bring him to David and Marina so they could assess what kind of person he was from their life experience. Both Marina and David liked the young man. Gradually, life returned to its usual course, becoming quiet and peaceful, filled with the joy of communicating with children and grandchildren.